As Netanyahu was speaking on Sunday, thousands were again taking to the streets of Jerusalem and other Israeli cities, calling for his resignation and the release of all hostages in Gaza. Now, the protests are still ongoing. The Israeli Prime Minister met with the family of one of the hostages on Sunday. The father of 19-year-old Nama Levy told Israel's army radio that they left the meeting, quote, disturbed and with no good news. Nadav Salzberger from the Change Generation movement is leading the Tel Aviv protests, and he told the UK's Telegraph newspaper on Sunday that the protests over the weekend were, quote, an eruption of underground currents that have reached.
They want the hostages to be released and they want the war to continue to be fair. Yeah, I mean, some do for sure. Chad, is he in Australia for real? Do I look like I'm still in Australia? That was April Fool's, baby. You got baited.
The boiling point. And he joins us now live from Jerusalem. Great to see you, Nadav. Thank you so much for taking the time today. Look, over the weekend, we saw an eruption of anti-government protests across many parts of Israel. But your specific movement is calling for something very specific. I want you to take me through what you and your members want.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to start by mentioning the 134 hostages still held captive in Gaza, including women, elderly, and children. We are fighting and praying for their immediate release. We are a movement called the Change Generation. After October 7th, we realized that Netanyahu and his coalition have no intent of taking responsibility over the worst disaster in Israel's history. So we have taken to the streets and we formed a young movement comprised of young Israelis, reservists, and students with the goal of replacing the current government with a responsible government, one deserving of the Israeli people. That is our goal.
So you're calling for elections and a change in government, essentially?
Yes. Yeah, we're calling for election.
Over and above, of course, importantly, and the release of hostages, which is important. But you've also said something interesting, and just reading up about what your movement is about, that Netanyahu hasn't prioritized hostages. So what do you think he has prioritized instead?
I think that Netanyahu has prioritized the survival, his own political survival, and the survival of his coalition. I think that while many people, including politicians, are doing their best to try and bring back the hostages, it simply isn't enough. I think that we, as the young generation who grew up under Netanyahu, have witnessed rotten leadership, and it's time for us to step up and demand better leadership for all Israelis.
So Netanyahu has rejected calls for elections, saying that it's going to dismantle the talks that are currently underway, specifically for hostage release. We also know that Hamas has said that all hostages will be released if there's a sustained ceasefire. So what are your views on the current negotiations and, importantly, on a ceasefire?
We believe that the war against Hamas is a just war. We believe that Hamas is a threat not only to Israelis, but also to Palestinians, and that Israel must triumph over Hamas. That is why we are not calling for a ceasefire. We believe that the war needs to be fought until the end, but we also believe that we should prioritize bringing back the hostages, even if it means pausing the same way we paused a couple of months ago to bring back hostages. And we also believe that declaring a schedule for elections a couple of months from now will not hurt or damage neither the war efforts or the efforts to bring back the hostages, but rather allow the current government to act without being dependent on politics or its own survival.
Check yourself with diabetes, brother. You got to get up to pee a lot, bro. Early signs is peeing a lot. Take a day off. I actually took a shit. It was a quick one. It's so funny. I love being an Amazon employee because of my little micromanagers in the community. It is pretty fun because it's basically like it's basically like having a bunch of micromanagers be like, I timed your piss. Like, you're pissing a lot. You have diabetes. You should get that checked out. A lot of time off task happening here. Is shitting in Australia or America? No, America, 100%. Because I have bidets in my house. It's one of the worst things when I'm traveling. Nobody has fucking bidets in their homes, and I hate it. No bidets in the bathrooms in the hotel. No bidets in the bathrooms in people's houses, and it's like I feel like I can't poop without a bidet. It's not rich guy shit. It's not. It's like $30, dude. It's not like a bidet is just like $30. It's also funny when people say rich guy shit because pretty much the entirety of the global south uses a bidet. So that's what's really funny. It's like infinitely poorer people on the global economy. Like, every toilet in Turkey has a fucking bidet in it. What do you mean rich guy shit? It's like pretty funny to be like, wow, oh man, I can't believe how fucking wealthy you are with your fucking bidet. And it's like, it's $25, man. Bidets are way more normalized in Chinatown, Asiatown neighborhoods. When I moved to a house with a place, big Vietnamese population, my place had those. Yeah. Anyway, let's continue.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, families of hostages, we've heard just harrowing stories of the uncertainty that they're experiencing. I want to turn now to the UN Security Council resolution that within it said that famine is setting in Gaza right now. You know, from what we've been seeing and Netanyahu's policies essentially of not allowing enough aid into Gaza has gotten a lot of criticism from aid organizations. They're describing dire realities. From your perspective, how are you viewing this? And does this worry you and your members, importantly?
Again, I think we are worried for our future in Israel, for the future of the region. I think that what we have seen yesterday in Jerusalem are hundreds of thousands of patriots going to the streets and demanding a better future. I think we are done waiting for politicians to make things.
Damn, dude. Really? That's it? Like, no, like, that's what you got for the aid stuff? Give us a little bit, man. Come on. Give us a little bit to be like, yeah, it's really fucked up. Because, like, there's a liberal Zionist line here. Here, I'll tell it to you, okay? Here's what you are supposed to say. You're supposed to say, no, I know, I heard he said he doesn't want the war to stop. I know. He doesn't want to disrupt the war efforts. Okay? Which already is, like, bad. What you're supposed to do is say, I think that in order for Israeli security, for Israel's security interests in the region, Palestinians have to be able to live freely. Okay? Palestinians have to be able to live freely, and obviously disrupting aid is not only bad because it, makes us look bad in the eyes of the Western world, but it also is bad because it's starving at the Palestinians and making them more radical to Israel's existence in the region. That is the liberal Zionist line. But I do think that many liberal Zionists have gone beyond that, especially ones in Israel. No, this is not about conscience. No, I'm talking about it. No, guys, you don't understand. This is strategic. Okay? These guys are not even defending Israel's interests and hitting the two-state solution line. They're just basically saying, we don't want Netanyahu to continue the war. We want our guy to do the war. Okay? That's ridiculous. They want an even more on one guy? No, what you're describing is a line that basically doesn't exist anymore in Israel. There's like 11 people that are concerned with Palestinian livelihood. They will inevitably turn to that direction. I was right in the past, and I'm right on this as well. Okay? I was right in the past on this, and I'm currently also right. History will vindicate me on liberal Zionism being the way forward for Israel. They will have to re-maneuver back to liberal Zionism, either by force or I don't know. I mean, they are going to have to do that. There's no way that they can continue being as genocidal and continue demanding support from the Western world. Check my logs, damn it. You are unbelievably wrong. Dude, it's 12:52. Shut the fuck up. And for the record, the Israelis that are in this chat aren't liberal Zionists, they're anti-Zionists, okay? So don't give him that shit either. The 4 Israeli leftists that are in this chat are not fucking liberals at all. They are communists and socialists. They are probably even more communist and more socialist than you are. Okay? That's very different. I'm talking about liberal Zionism as like the center left Israeli policy in an effort to get more support from the Western world as Israel's apartheid continues, as Israel's genocidal campaign continues. I think a lot of people don't personally understand in Israel that, like, you know, their attitude may have shifted. Their attitude on the Palestinian question may have shifted to Hitlerian politics, but the rest of the world looks at that and goes, that's Hitlerian. Stop doing that.
It's better. I think that we need to make them better, and that we, the young people in Israel, are the generation that will bring change to the region and to Israel. Yeah, and I think that I know that we plan on continuing our protest.
All right, Nadav Salzberger, great to have you on. Thank you for taking the time. CNN is also learning that senior US and Israeli officials will meet virtually today to discuss Israel's proposed ground offensive in Rafah. A US official says the two sides are still working towards an in-person meeting on the issue. Face-to-face talks were abruptly called off last week by the Israeli Prime Minister after Washington refused to block a UN resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu.
What is this? The Israeli the Israeli Labor Party is not a thing, okay? There is no real Labor Party in Israel. And also, the Israeli Labor Party is not even remotely liberal on the position of Zionism or even on the position of like Palestinian existence. The president of Israel is a Labor Party member who literally has said some of the most unhinged shit. Okay? They're not even popular. They're nothing. The president of Israel is a Labor Party member who has famously also said genocidal things in the aftermath of October 7. And not only has he said genocidal things, he also has said other shit like talking about miscegenation among Jews and non-Jews and how that's a bad thing. And that was way before October 7. So these guys are like, I would say the frequency which you use Zionism as a negative catch-all is extremely problematic and promotes monolithic ideas. No, the only monolithic idea is at the top of the hour, you think that you can fucking hit me with a 3-minute ad break. Okay? Don't even try this shit with me. Okay? It's ridiculous. These baits are ridiculous. Okay? At the top of the hour, there's a 3-minute ad break. Wait, what? No, this guy was being serious. Zionism is a catch-all. Zionism as a catch-all means that Israel must exist as a Jewish majority demographic ethno-state. Okay? That's it. Which is why it doesn't matter if you're liberal. It's like saying I'm a liberal fascist. I thought he was fucking baiting me. Turns out he's not baiting me at all. He was being serious. Anyway, the top of the hour is a catch-all, though, for those who haven't subscribed for $5 or for free with a Twitch Prime. The people who had opposition to Zionism in the early development, or the opposition to the way that like Israel has developed itself in the early days of Israel, like Einstein, would be considered anti-Zionist by today's standards for their criticisms, even if they originally considered themselves to be Zionist. Okay? There are plenty of early Zionists who then, King Henry IV, thank you for the 20 community gift of subs, by the way. I'm going to run the 3-minute ad break now. There are plenty of people who originally called themselves Zionists who now abhor that designation. And the reason why they think it's abhorrent is because they recognize that there is no way to do Zionism without settler colonialism, settler colonial occupation, and the maintenance of a demographic Jewish majority ethno-state. There are ways to be Zionist in Israel just the way you can be socialist and critical of the U.S. I have not seen what this way is, the way you're describing it. Okay? I don't understand it. I'm not saying that the settler colonialism isn't abhorrent, just as some people wouldn't criticize that. What? I mean, I am an American. I'm an American citizen. I love America. I love the promise of America. But what do I always... I am incredibly critical of America's imperialism. I'm incredibly critical of America's hyper-capitalist policies and how it kills Americans on a regular basis. The difference is I'm very open about my criticisms, and that, like, if I was in Israel, if I was an Israeli citizen, my counterparts in Israel are people who call themselves anti-Zionists. Okay? They do not call themselves liberal Zionists. They call themselves anti-Zionists. They understand that Zionism is about the maintenance of a Jewish demographic majority ethno-state. This means this means that there's a constant struggle amongst those who want to exist inside of Israel, or those who live under the colonial occupation, that will never get full-blown rights. So I'm not caught up on this distinction. I don't care about the distinction, because Zionism is fascist inherently. If you want there to be a ethno-state, if you want there to be an ethno-state, a Jewish ethno-state in Israel, that is an inherently fascist idea. The only difference is it's just like the in-group is Jewish rather than white, so it doesn't translate in the same way to Americans. They don't really fully get it. Zionism doesn't call for a Jewish majority, but the right of Jews to live peacefully in Israel. Yeah, except in practice, that is about maintaining a Jewish ethno-state. In practice, you're using the conservative definition. No, I'm using the realistic definition. I'm using what has happened. That's it. That is a inevitability. People say, oh, it's about like Jews living safely in Israel, except it started off with the Nakba and a settler colonial project, and it has never stopped. It has only continued to get more and more reactionary as time has moved on. You know what I mean? So liberals in America might try to desperately change the narrative and say, like, no, that's not what this is about. That's not what this is about. If Zionism is fascist, the U.S. supports them to the fucking hilt. What does that make us? Fascist. I would never say that America's imperialist endeavors are not fascist. They are. The fuck? Yes, American imperialism is disgusting. It's deadly. It's devastating. But like, we're talking about a literal apartheid state that is desperately trying to maintain its apartheid regime while simultaneously engaging in an ethnic cleansing campaign. I think like it's like having a conversation with like liberal Germans or something, like social democrats in Germany in like 1938 being like, no, you don't understand. Like there are still plenty of people who don't like the National Socialists. We just don't really have any other way to, stop this Lebensraum policies of the National Socialist Party. Unfortunately, I think you're wrong on the Israeli moving towards the American version of liberal Zionism. No one inside Israel understands why the rest of the world hates them, and they think they're the normal ones. You're right on everything else you said, though. Yeah, no, this will take time for them to reposition, and America will continue doing PR in that regard. It's crazy you don't acknowledge the large contingent of Zionists who want a chill and fun apartheid. Anyway. Let's
says
continue.
U.S. pressure will not stop an Israeli ground operation in Rafah.
We will go into Rafah and eliminate Hamas battalions there for one simple reason. There is no victory without entering Rafah, and there is no victory without eliminating Hamas.
Here. Statement from the Special Ops Vets for Democracy. We know Netanyahu well personally. The thing that scares him the most is anger crowds in the streets. It is our job now to give it to him. He's hiding and illegitimate. He's not fit to order warriors to battle. He's not fit to order warriors to battle. The anti-Netanyahu protests in a nutshell. The problem is not that their leader is presiding over a genocide or that their colonial state and ethno-national society are oppressive and evil, is that they deserve a better warlord. I support the anti-Netanyahu protests insofar as I support internal division and instability that weaken the settler colonies' resolve and competence. Here's another take that I want to show you. Matthew Noah Smith says, I'm Jewish, so I'm disposed to love fellow Jews in Israel, especially my family and friends that live there, and to love the family and friends of people who are a part of my Jewish community here. Then I see the poll results about Israeli attitudes towards the suffering of Gazans, and I'm disgusted. This is very important to understand. I know Giannis was on Majority Report today. He's going to be on my stream soon, too. To what extent should Israel take into consideration the suffering of the civilian population in Gaza when planning the continuation of the fighting there? October 23rd, 83.5% of Israeli Jews said to a fairly small extent or not at all. December 23rd, it was 81%. There has been a 3% shift only since October 23rd, 3.5%. 80% of Israeli Jews still believe to a fairly small extent or not at all that Israel should take into consideration the suffering of the civilian population in Gaza. Okay? What's wild here also is that 23% of Arab Palestinians living in Israel said that they care to a fairly small extent or not at all. I don't understand how the fuck that works, but what do you think of the Samson option exposed by Shimon Peres and the plan of Israel destroying everything with their nukes? Yeah, I mean, that's you can't keep that in consideration. Even the Jewish left in Israel is split. 40% of the Jewish left says not to take the suffering of Palestinians into consideration when planning the war. The inhumanity of this opposition. Babies are starving, and nearly 50% of the left thinks this doesn't merit consideration. Suppose the U.S. try to prevent famine and drought. Oh, yeah, you're right. Elent is correct. It might be like the Druze, maybe. Suppose the U.S. tried to prevent famine in Gaza by making a half-assed effort to save the lives of starving children and babies whose crimes was to be born in the wrong place in the wrong time. Guess what? Most Israelis think that weakens Israel's bargaining power. President Biden has announced that the United States intends to construct a jetty in Gaza to facilitate a supply of humanitarian aid. In your opinion, how will such a step affect Israel's bargaining power vis-a-vis Hamas? On the Israeli left, 43% think it's strengthening Israel's bargaining power. 31% say it's weakening Israel's bargaining power. On the center, 54% say it's weakening Israel's bargaining power. And on the right, 67.5% think it's weakening Israel's bargaining power. I believe you read the graph wrong. Wait, what do you mean? What did I read wrong about this? 80% of the Jewish population of Israel, it's socialism or barbarism. Thank you for the 10 community gift of subs. 80% of the Jewish population of Israel, remember, this is Israel's own demographic percentage numbers. Obviously, it's not mine. Israel itself says you're either a Jew or you're Arab. Even though there are Arab Jews are classified as Jewish under Israel, under the Israeli standards. Okay? When Israel says someone is an Arab in their polling, they're talking about Christians and Muslims. Arab Christians and Arab Muslims are considered Arab. Arab Jews are considered Jewish because it is a Jewish ethno-state. Read the legend, the blue color. Yes, to a fairly large or very large extent. Yeah. What I don't really like is that you insist on calling USA fascist. There are pretty clear definitions on proto-fascism, and the U.S. does not really come close to it. It hurts your valid arguments. Just call it what it is: neoliberalism, conservatism, capitalism, etc. Fascism is capitalism in crisis. Capitalism inevitably leads into fascism. When capitalism cannot reinforce the mechanisms of control, fascism kicks in to implement some kind of order that maintains the continuation of the capitalist order of the economy. American imperialism, in the way that it manifests globally, is pretty similar to fascism in general. Just because America is not doing it because they're like, oh, we believe in like a white American future, and that's why we're invading Iraq, it doesn't change the reality for those who are being butchered and slaughtered on the ground. I understand what you're trying to say. I get it. But colloquially speaking, there is it's a distinction without a difference. Capitalism inevitably degrades because it needs consistent conquest. It needs new vectors of exploitation in order to consistently generate better profits or increase profit margins. Okay? And inevitably, you increase the living conditions, you improve the living conditions of the places that you are exploiting. And you are looking for, as you are looking for new vectors of exploitation, you turn domestically to new vectors of exploitation, and you hyper exploit your own base of support internally, which has happened in America. I mean, our entire industry is basically wiped out of any sort of manufacturing capabilities, and it's mostly just a service sector industry. It's mostly gig economy jobs. And when that happens, there's instability domestically, and that instability domestically has to be stopped. How do you stop that instability? You take advantage of the volatility by pushing more and more fascist policies like incredibly reactionary white nativist immigration agendas, incredibly militant and draconian prison carceral structure, so that you have a steady flow of slave labor, which is constitutionally allowed according to the 13th Amendment. And you slowly but surely move in the direction of fascism as we understand it. Israel, in its demographic interests, is, of course, closer to fascism, if not complete fascism, than the United States of America is, as though, because there is no like direct imperative, at least now, in the United States of America to like aesthetically create a white ethno-state, a white majority ethno-state. That just is a byproduct of our anti-immigrant policies that just kind of happens to be that way as we bring more and more people under the banner of white. Anyway, you say, it does weaken Israel's bargaining power. First, this worldview is morally bankrupt. Second, it's not clear that Hamas gives a shit, and according to Israel's own justifications of their war, Hamas doesn't. Third, you fucking monster. The plurality of Israeli Jews want unconditional support from the U.S., so liberal American Jews hand-wringing about Bibi and the suffering of Gaza is purely to ease our own consciences. The plurality of Israeli Jews probably just want us to shut up. What should Israel do? Act in coordination with the Americans or act in accordance with the judgment of the Israeli leadership? 43% of Israeli Jews say act in coordination with the Americans. 49% of Israeli Jews say act in accordance with the judgment of Israel's leadership. The problem is not Bibi and Israel's right-wing coalition. The problem is deep and runs throughout much of Israeli public. There's not much left about Israel that I can love. Also, fuck all you anti-Semites who would weaponize this. Polling data here. Postscript, it's while the Senator Amy Klobuchar, who is fairly middle of the road for a Democratic senator, wants more action to protect human rights than many on the Israeli left. Perhaps there will be a genuine split between Israel and the Dems here in the U.S. I think there will be. I cannot stress enough that it is possible for Israel to fight Hamas in a less careless fashion. To Israelis who I have no right to speak because I'm not Israeli, I say you have no right to speak of acting for all Jews because you're not diasporic Jews. Stop justifying a war by saying you act not for all of us, you act for yourselves. If you insist on protecting my American family as a justification for killing Palestinian families, then you directly implicate me in war. You give me standing to speak. Anyway. Jesus Christ is Benjamin Netanyahu and the IDF that continues to raise them towards Palestinians. There's no two ways about it. I think a lot of people, understandably, don't want to recognize that this is a problem that is deep, embedded in the minds of many Israelis. Okay? It will change, and it inevitably will change. It will be forced. Israelis will be forced to change their attitude and the way that they conduct themselves in the global stage as a consequence of like Western support diminishing for their genocidal campaign, as it has post October 7. But it's going to take a while. But I don't understand how people still go like, oh, this is not real Zionism. It's different. This is Zionism.
Hamas battalions there.
All right, well, talk's back on, and I want to head to Washington now and bring in CNN's Natasha Bertrand. Natasha, I want to get into, what the U.S. has repeatedly said, and it's warned Israel about a siege into Rafah. In this virtual meeting aimed at Netanyahu, do you think that he's going to be able to convince the U.S. that they have a workable plan? Can the U.S. be convinced of a Rafah operation?
Well, the answer is that it really depends, because as of right now, the U.S. is extremely skeptical, and they have been urging Israeli officials, including in talks with the Israeli defense minister last week, to come up with an alternative plan, one that is not what the Israelis have been planning, such as a large-scale ground operation into Rafah that could endanger the over 1 million Palestinians that have sought shelter there over the last few months. And what the Israelis are saying is that, look, we need a way to eliminate these remaining Hamas battalions. And the U.S. is responding, well, you could go after them with a more targeted approach, something that targets more senior figures in Hamas rather than going in and doing an all-out assault. And so I think what the U.S. is still waiting to see from the Israelis is a concrete plan to move those civilians out of the area. And that is something that Israel has not been able to provide them with yet. And until they do, until they provide some kind of blueprint for how they're going to get those people out of that area, perhaps allowing them to move back north, then the U.S. is really not going to be on board with this. Now, among the proposals the U.S. has given to the Israelis is to ramp up talks with the Egyptians to try to seal that border so that Israel can conduct these more precision operations targeting these senior Hamas leaders without the possibility that they're just going to then escape, of course, across the border into Egypt. Of course, another aspect of this is that really targeted operation that the U.S. says that the Israelis should try, and that's something that they have been pushing them to do for months and months instead of doing these large-scale operations that really do endanger the civilians there. But the Israelis are going to do what they're going to do, and that is the message that we got last week in talks with Israeli officials, is that they are going to do what they believe is best for eliminating the remaining Hamas battalions in that area. Now, whether there are any consequences for the Israelis ignoring the Americans' advice, that remains to be seen, because we have seen that the U.S. has continued to provide them with weapons, with intelligence to help them prosecute this war against Hamas. And so the question now is, are there any red lines here? If the Israelis do move forward with this operation in Rafah, how is the U.S. going to respond, especially if it's in a way that the U.S. has explicitly advised against? Delaney.
How can you say that the fascist state will change? Not every action will be rational under that structure. No, I'm not saying that the practice will change. I'm saying that I'm not saying that the practice of fascism will change. I'm simply stating that in order to maintain an apartheid, the outward communication of Israeli apartheid will have to go back to liberal Zionism and talking about a two-state solution. And if they don't do that, then it's already destined to fail.